Welcome back to season 3 of Life Beyond Loss, the podcast. This is episode 3, and this is a guest show where we share amazing and inspiring stories of people navigating their grief after loss and often also experiencing very positive change and transformation as a result of their experiences. I'm your host, Louise Kresick, grief and loss coach, and today I'm talking to Suzannah Butcher, who is owner of Calmpreneur. I need to make a very quick apology to Suzannah because for whatever reason, all the way through this episode, I've called her Suzanne, and maybe my brain checked out in that area, I'm not sure, but I do know that her name is in fact Suzannah. And we are just covering so much in this episode. It's absolute gold. So Suzanna's sharing the story of how, losing her dad to alcohol addiction and how this kind of really stemmed way back in her childhood as well, and how that impacted her. We talk about funeral planning and what those early days and going into that kind of doing mode, what that's like. We talk about therapy, we talk about anxiety and the impact that grief can have on our mental health, and we talk a little bit about mindfulness as well. And Suzannah shares some fabulous tips at the end of things that we can do to really look after ourselves in the early days of grief. So anyway, I am rambling onwards to today's episode because this is just simply brilliant. I'm joined on today's show by Suzannah Butcher, who is a business mentor and also the founder of Calmpreneur. I don't know why I said it like that, Suzanne, Calmpreneur, but it just sort of rolls off the tongue like calm. I love that word anyway. But yeah, so tell us just a little bit about what a business mentor does and, your calmpreneur stuff.
Well, basically, so I've been in business for over 10 years now, and I was kind of a bit fed up with all the hustle and grind and stress of being in business, and I just wanted to really share that with other people and let them know that there is a different way of working, like you can do things in a more calm way and still be super productive at the same time. So Calmpreneur is really just about kind of sharing that message and offering training as well as my business mentoring, which I work kind of one-on-one with people and in my group as well.
Yeah, and I know like we've talked about this anyway, and we're going to sort of talk more about how you came to kind of, I guess, do what you do and why that calm is so important to you, because it is kind of related, isn't it, to your experience of loss?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, the whole thing's kind of just, it's like everything has kind of taken me on this journey so far to where I am now, and it's finally like the jigsaw is coming together, which just feels, really nice because it's been a long time.
Yeah, and I think for most people that I speak to, we're all, coaches, mentors, etc., healers. We're all kind of doing the job that we do pretty much because it's steeped in our own kind of personal experiences in some form or another.
Yeah.
So how about just sharing with us then, if you wouldn't mind, a little bit of background then in terms of your experience around loss. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes. So basically, so I had quite a difficult childhood, quite a kind of traumatic childhood, very difficult relationship in particular with my father, who was an alcoholic. And basically he was kind of like, it was a very slow suicide, and that just sounds so awful, but that's kind of what it felt like, because I've lost count of the amount of times that he went to the doctor and was given 6 months to live if he carried on drinking, because he was drinking so heavily. And you know, my parents, rightly or wrongly, shared that with us, myself and my 4 younger siblings. So there was always like, oh God, you know, dad might die. And then he just carried on drinking, and it got a lot worse when my parents separated. And then finally, obviously, unfortunately, he did pass away when I was 27 and he was 50, directly as a result of alcohol-related illnesses.
So that's quite a significant journey, really, in your life, isn't it? That's, like you say, him sort of, you know, watching his health deteriorate over quite a long period of time. So that must have had, you know, a bit of an impact on, well, a lot of an impact on you, but I suppose in many different ways, because what age were you, did you say, when this kind of,
I was
became
27.
apparent? Yeah.
When I knew he was drinking, obviously, from a really young age, spent quite a lot of time in pub gardens, and obviously just his behaviour changed quite dramatically. So I know it's a lot of children of alcoholics will express that, you know, it's a bit like living with a Jekyll and Hyde character, and that's really what it felt like. And in some respects, I think that I was almost grieving for my dad even before he died, because the bit that I remembered, like the nice part of my dad, kind of slowly died out over time. And then most of my memory, sadly, are of, you know, my dad when he was drunk, and that kind of really erratic and unusual behaviour that he had.
Yeah. How did that impact you as a kid then?
Well, I think I lived a lot like I was in fear. So, you know, you talk about that kind of fight or flight response when you're kind of in situations like that. And I was in quite a lot of situations where I felt in danger, or that I was kind of having to grow up a lot faster than I should have been, really, as a child. And now it certainly at points in my life kind of has come back to me, that kind of, it's not formally a thing yet, I don't think, but it's called complex PTSD, where you're in a period in your life where you kind of can't escape. And that's how it felt. It was very fearful kind of childhood, and that impacts me now. So when I smell like alcohol or cider or like beer breath or cigarette breath, like in the street or something, I kind of do get a reaction from that, because obviously it brings back those sort of traumatic memories.
Isn't it amazing how, you know, we can experience those kind of memories through lots of different kind of mediums, different senses? When I was doing my master's degree in psychology, I did my dissertation on what we call olfactory memory, so sense of smell, and how that triggers memories, which is, I've just always found so fascinating that, you know, when we talk about, you know, people in grief, I think sometimes people don't realise that there are all these kind of triggers, and it's not just like the obvious things, it's sometimes like those little things that can sort of trigger us.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think there's kind of a plus side to that historical memory thing as well with the smells, because obviously when you have lost somebody, if you do smell like their aftershave or their perfume, or their clothing, that side of it can actually be quite comforting, because then you're taken back to the memory of them, you know, at a deeper level.
Yeah, definitely. I talked about, I don't know about you, but we had these amazing thunderstorms last week over here.
Yes.
And that was like something like that. It was a trigger for me, because I remembered my mum, you're going to laugh at this, my mum used to tell me that it's okay because the Care Bears were moving house. Whenever we had... But it was a trigger, because it was a lovely, like you say, a comforting kind of memory, and it just took me right back to, you know, being in her arms and that comforting kind of.
Oh, bless you. It's really weird, isn't it, when we don't expect it sometimes as well? It kind of like just creeps up on you and you think, oh my God, that's why.
Yeah. So obviously this clearly, you know, had an impact on you, and probably you as a family as well. Was there any kind of, do you remember any kind of like help being available, or external kind of help that was given to you as a family at that time? Just kind
No, because by then the family had kind of separated. So my parents had separated, and I was the next of kin. So it was really difficult. I delayed my grief for sure. And I went into big sister, planning mode to help my brothers along as well. But it wasn't really until afterwards I did seek grief counselling with Cruz, which did help. But again, I just think I touched the surface really, of that grief. And in some respects, I still feel like a part of me doesn't really believe it still. I know that sounds really weird, but part of me is like thinks, yeah, he's still there, he's still at the house and he's still drinking and still got all his mates, and maybe that's just like a comfort thing in some ways.
It's interesting, isn't it, how complex grief can be. And, there's all these layers and also, somebody was sort of talking in my community towards the end of last week about the fact that she'd lost her daughter in pretty horrific circumstances, and there was sort of criminal justice system processes attached to all this grief. And it's all sort of, we talk about, you just mentioned there, delayed grief. And that's the thing, isn't it? I think quite often, there's all these aspects to it, like there can be a trauma or there can be secondary losses that occur and all these sorts of things. But quite often we just, in that moment or at that period of time, we just kind of step in and do what needs to be done first.
Yeah,
you said about being
it's
big
like,
sister and,
Yeah, it's just like that autopilot kicks in just to get through. And, in a way, like having to arrange a funeral is like pretty horrendous, but it kind of gives you something to do. It kind of, that you have to get this thing done, and that's like your mission, because it's quite a quick time period that you have to arrange all this stuff. And it's like, oh God, like the next day or even the same day, you've got to be phoning people up and arranging flowers and, sending out invites in whatever way that might be. There's a lot to do, but it does it just brings a new dimension to that horrible week, that first week, which is just horrendous after you lose somebody. It kind of, it's a third party thing that's there that, you've just got to crack on with that.
Yeah, it just sometimes make me wonder, like, is there a better way? I don't know what the answer is, but, it's just that it just seems that kind of the way that which we handle the approach to death and dealing with it and all the things that we need to do is so traditional, isn't it? Like it literally goes back centuries, doesn't it? Like hundreds of years. And yet actually, yet we have evolved, kind of emotionally and psychologically and all the rest of it, in the way we deal with grief probably needs to be maybe different. I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but it's weird, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah, I agree. I think, God, what difference it could make if like funeral directors actually had a more kind of holistic approach to this, where it wasn't quite so formal and blunt, and that you had almost like a support person that would come and say, like, this is what needs to happen, and we can do this for you and we can do this for you, like more of like a planner, like a funeral planner. And there might even be people like that out there, I don't know, but that would be pretty amazing, because that would enable you to really help you to grieve in some respects, but also to be there in a better capacity for the other people around you as well.
Yeah, I think my experience is there are some services that are starting to kind of evolve. Some funeral directors may be looking at things slightly differently, but I think it's just kind of, we're just scratching the surface really with that. So yeah, it was really interesting that you kind of mentioned that. So when you kind of got to Cruz and was able to then sort of start, sort of dealing with your grief and talking about it, what was that like for you?
Do you know, it's really weird. I have very little recollection of that time in my life. I think because of the problems that I had as a child, I kind of have this disassociation thing, which is quite common with trauma. And I remember very little. I remember it helping, and I remember that they were good. they were understanding, but I can't even remember what we talked about. I can't remember what that looked like at all. So I'm really sorry. I can't kind of answer that question.
Well, actually, no, again, that's really interesting, because obviously I work with clients sometimes in a space where they've already been through therapy. And so actually that is quite common in terms of feedback. So when they're in that therapy in those earlier days of grief, or they're just trying to, I guess, unpick the grief, it often feels like a bit of a blur, which is really interesting, isn't it? Because it's sort of, I don't know, again, what that really tells us, but it's just really interesting that does happen.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think it's been more of a, for me, it has just been a, over the years thing that that acceptance, I guess, is kind of gradually sinking in. But like any grief, I get times where it really does hit me, and I just think, God, I wish that things were different. But then also knowing that probably they could never have been, because he was, he had an illness. He was addicted to alcohol, and it is an illness, and he didn't get the support that he needed, and also he wasn't ready. He didn't get to that point where he could change.
Do you think there was any kind of work around forgiveness to be done from your point of view?
Oh yeah, because God, I hate it. Like, I hated him. This just sounds so awful, but growing up, I hated him. I remember once my mum left him, and we went to what was then called, which again is an awful thing, it was called a battered wives hostel or home or something, to kind of flee the circumstances. And we were actually at a place in Weston-super-Mare, and I remember just sort of walking around with my mum and my brothers, and my dad showed up. And they were talking on the beach, my mum and dad, and I kind of got the gist they were getting back together. And I was fuming. Like, I was just like, for God's sake, you're so weak. Like, can't you see this? Literally, I was about 7, 7 or 8 at the time. So yeah, I did hate him. And when he died, it's just like, oh God, how do you begin to even think about the complexity of the feelings that I had towards him, because I loved him, and yet I hated him, and yet I was really angry with him, and yet I felt sorry for him. There's a lot of kind of unraveling to be done about my feelings towards him and that forgiveness. But certainly for the addiction, I've come to a better understanding now about that.
Yeah, I guess it's that. Yeah, I mean, I don't have personal experience with addiction, but I'd imagine you sort of almost trying to separate out like the behaviour from the person.
Yeah, definitely. And like, and also as I've got older, like I'm 46 now, so in 4 years' time I'll be the age that my dad was when he died. And like, you know what it's like, you still feel like you were when you were like in your 20s. So I know that he was vulnerable, like he was a dad, and I saw him as a father figure, and what I thought he should have been as a father, but actually he was still a human being, and he carried his own stuff that had happened to him throughout his life.
So you're quite open then about your anxiety, as am I. Which I think is a really amazing thing. I think that's just so helpful to be so open with it as well, and to inspire others. But I just wondered, so how is your anxiety is it kind of related to your loss? Do you feel that has it always been there, or is it something that was kind of triggered at a various point? Or
I think that I have, I've always been an anxious person. So I was an anxious child. I would worry a lot about death and dying and pets dying and losing people, and just worry about school. Like, I had school phobia, and I felt very blamed. Like, I would always feel guilty about stuff, and that led to lots of kind of anxious thoughts and feelings. So yeah, I have always had it. I had kind of more depression really throughout my teens and my 20s. And I didn't really understand anxiety. Like, it wasn't talked about quite so much back then as it is now. Now I can definitely recognise that I have that anxiety, and I have my trigger is like rumination. So I know that as soon as I start ruminating on something bad happening, like I have this thing where I catastrophize about stuff. So I suddenly might think, oh my God, that's the last time I'm going to see that person, and I didn't say goodbye properly. And then I kind of like have all these scenarios going off. So yeah, that's how it kind of affects me. But I'm really aware of it now, and I've, you know, having been through sort of CBT and just getting to know myself a bit better, I kind of know when anxiety is creeping in, so I'm able to deal with it a lot better than I used to be able to.
So how did you, I find this really interesting, because I think similar to myself, if I look back over my anxiety, I'd always been a fairly anxious child, really. As my mum used to describe it, as highly strung. So that's how she, you know, because like you say, there wasn't the awareness around anxiety like there is now. And I think pretty much it probably was being a very anxious child. Apparently I used to cry until I made myself sick and all these kind of things. But then I guess I suppose what I'm interested in as well, because my grief, the anxiety had always been there, and then throughout my teenage years suddenly kind of went up a notch, if you like. And then when I lost my mum, that was really quite severely triggered for me. It sent me in quite a, I would say, moderate to high kind of anxiety, depression situation. So I'm just interested from your point of view, whether that was something you had to manage through, you know, your experience of loss. Did it have any impact on your mental health?
Yeah, I think not so much with anxiety, because I think I did go into that kind of autopilot mode, and kept a lid on it to some extent, which obviously wasn't very healthy looking back. But yeah, it triggered obviously all sorts of stuff for me about not having a dad to give me away, because I was getting married the year after he died. So we kind of had to decide whether we wanted to actually get married in this country, and in the end we ended up going abroad, because I thought I can't cope with that. And then obviously triggered more so, I think, when I have my kids as well. Like that's been quite a kind of triggering time for the grief side of things. So yeah, I definitely had an impact, but it's been more, it wasn't really at that time, like that first year, it didn't really hit me properly, I don't think.
So what are the ways that you found to kind of sort of manage your mental health then, and keep yourself well?
So I have got like this quite strict routine, which I do. So I get up now. I've been doing this for about 3 months actually. But before that, I've been doing it sort of on and off for a few years, not quite as habitual as what I do now. So I get up at 6 o'clock most mornings, which I never ever thought I'd be able to do. And I literally have an hour where I just do stuff for me. So I always meditate first, and then I journal. And then I might do some affirmations, and then I might do some vision board work. And I just have some silent time as well. Like I just have that time to just reflect a little bit, just think about where I am that day, what I would like to do for my business, how I'm feeling, whether I might need some time extra for self-care. So like if I wake up and I'm feeling a bit wobbly, then I know that actually maybe today is a day where I do have a longer walk at lunchtime, or I go to the beach or I go out for a walk in nature. And certainly as well, having a dog has just been amazing, like for my mental health, because it forces me to get out and it forces me to be in nature and like soak up that ambience of being in silence and seeing trees and being just with myself. It's been amazing.
People out there listening will be no strangers to the fact that I have a little pooch, and Ben, and I absolutely agree with you. He's just absolutely been a life changer for many different reasons, and I did talk about this on one of my blogs about the benefits of having a pet to our well-being. Yeah, because I just think it's so often kind of overlooked, and I know people kind of say, in general, it really helps you, but actually there is this real hardcore scientific research that proves absolutely that it can be of so many benefits. So yeah,
whilst I never say anybody needs to go and get a pet, I definitely do understand what you're saying about, the benefits of that. It's just, and obviously living by the sea, living by the seaside for you must be just absolutely amazing.
It is, yeah, it's lovely. It's, I go there and I look out at the open ocean, and, everything is behind me, and all I can see is this great kind of expanse of space. And that really just helps with a kind of whole calm, like, okay, take a moment.
So how do you think, this whole kind of journey that you've been on with your loss and with your mental health, how's that kind of shaped your life mission, if you like, your purpose and the work that you do?
So my main purpose is really all about my family. Like when I was growing up, I wasn't a particularly ambitious person, and going through what I did with my mum and dad when I was little, and also having quite a long infertility journey as well, I just knew that when I did finally become a mum, that my main thing would be about making life as good as I possibly could for these like 2 new humans that I created. So a lot of that was about spending time with them, being able to go to everything at their schools. So that's when I kind of really started out in business, because I just thought, I knew that I couldn't really get that flexibility with a conventional job. So then I started my business journey, moved to the coast. Kind of my husband and I both gave up our jobs and took a risk really to kind of live near the sea. So it's all about just giving them the best life that they can, but also obviously healing myself along that journey as well. And it's been difficult, being in business is really difficult, and that's brought up like loads more challenges for me about imposter syndrome and self-doubt and am I doing the right thing kind of feelings. I have had like a bit of an about turn in the past year or so with my business, but everything is led hopefully to this point of moving forward and supporting other people really to have a better work-life harmony.
So clearly this has been all of this has been quite healing for you as well after your loss, as you said, and I just wondered if there's what are some of the other things that helped you as well to heal, specifically around that loss and coming, reconciling the losing your dad and all of that sort of history with that.
So I think that mindfulness and meditation has really helped me, and journaling as well has really helped me. I've learned quite a lot I read quite a lot about trauma and PTSD, and I kind of go out of my way to learn stuff. Like I find the whole kind of thing fascinating really, and I had my own addiction issues as well with alcohol, where although I wasn't drinking like really heavily, I was using alcohol to self-medicate. And I think since I gave up drinking, I do drink very occasionally now, but I've stopped my habitual drinking completely. That was like a trigger then for suddenly, it was almost like all these feelings were allowed to kind of bubble up a little bit, and so then I have more to do, and you think that the work's done sometimes, but I think it's a process, and I think that we have to think about life and happiness as a process, and that we don't have to be happy or sad. We can, we flow. And sometimes we're going to be happy, and sometimes we're going to be sad, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, what you said about life, it being the flow. And sometimes I think that we're trying to get to some kind of destination, and for me personally, I think life is the destination. Like it's just the journey that we're on, and that's it. So I love what you said there. And it is interesting, isn't it? Because there's definitely healthy and unhealthy ways of dealing with our grief. And sometimes people do turn to things like alcohol and other different things as well, like these habits, just to try and, as a comforter, I guess, isn't it? It becomes like a comforter.
It does, yeah. And I think I was certainly with the sort of PTSD, I found it really hard to relax. Although I thought I was relaxed, it was actually the alcohol that was kind of helping that. So I notice it now, like I'm still working on stuff, but when I'm sat watching TV, I'll suddenly notice that I am like, my arms tense, like it's really tense, and my jaw. I think, oh God, I've still got to let go a bit more. And breathing really helps as well with that, you know, having kind of controlled breathing and really thinking about my body and being in tune with my body as well, whereas I used to kind of think, right, my brain's up here in my head, my body's down there.
Yeah.
And they're like separate, they're actually all together, you know. And I think, you know, maybe if I've got a tummy ache or my IBS is playing up, you know, what's that, why is that, what's that telling me about what's going on for me in my world at the moment? So just being a bit more intuitive about you know, my feelings, my thoughts and my feelings.
And you mentioned the magic word for me there, which is mindfulness.
Yeah.
So do you think that that's helped you to sort of develop that intuition? Because it is kind of a skill, I guess, isn't it, that to have that intuition? Has it helped you to become, you know, more aware of what's going on for you?
Definitely. And I still find it really hard sometimes to be in the moment, because I've got lots of ideas and my brain goes like 24/7. So I really, sometimes I almost have to concentrate, but then I think, oh God, now I'm concentrating too hard. Like, it's never going to happen. I'm not ever going to be in this moment. So yeah, I'm a lot more conscious of enjoying the little things and seeing the little things and acknowledging them. And I'm sure that you love the Headspace app like me. You know, that's
Yeah.
that's brilliant for kind of meditation and for being present and being aware of stuff. So yeah, that's really helped me as well.
Yeah, I tell you what I love about that app, the fact that it's just literally a few minutes at a time as well. And this is what I'm kind of, when I bang the mindfulness drum, I'm usually sort of, you know, getting the message out there to people that you don't have to go sit on a meditation cushion for an hour, you know, or commit to, you know, any huge long sort of activities. This is about flexing that muscle, I think, just a few minutes each day, which is far more beneficial than saving it all up to like the end of the week and then trying to sort of force yourself to sit on this cushion meditating for an hour. Do you know what I mean? I think that...
Oh yeah, God, yeah, absolutely. It is just, you know, just something little. Like, I'm quite a tactile person, so like just like feeling a pebble, like holding it in my hands and feeling its coldness and its solidness. And you know, that's just really important. Like, you know, doing things with my hands, I find that really helps me to be in the moment.
Yeah, definitely. We can make mindfulness quite fun and quite light-hearted, really. We can incorporate it into lots of different things that we're doing, which I think is a really important point. So what I want to ask you then, Suzanne, is kind of what would you offer other people out there in terms of maybe some tips or just some words of encouragement?
Oh, for grief?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that my friend said this was really helpful, actually. She sadly lost her mum a few years ago, and I was at a loss what to say. You know, obviously I said, you know, I'm really sorry. And I just told her I'm quite a list person. Like, I love making lists and I'm quite organised. And I just said, look, just write everything down. Like, just write everything down that you think you might need to do. And just try and do one thing a day. Or if you're having a good day, do 3 things. But no more than that. Just to give it some perspective, because when, you know, we've got everything in our head, it's so overwhelming, and there is a lot to do and there's a lot to think about, and you've got to invite Auntie Margaret or whatever to the funeral and little Bobby, or, do you know what I mean? There's so many things. Write it all down and do 1 to 3 things a day. So that's my first tip. My second one is to tell people what you need from them, or tell people what you need for you as well, because when people are grieving, it's hard to know what to say, and just acknowledging that sometimes they might not know what to say, and actually saying, God, is it okay if I just talk about my dad for a couple of minutes, or is it okay if you wouldn't mind just picking something up for me today, or would you be able to just make me a cup of tea? And just not being scared to ask people, because they will feel like, God, yeah, I'll do that. Of course I will, because they feel that then they're helping you as well. It gives them a purpose, and feeling like they're being supportive to you. And then my final one is to allow the grief, which is something that I'm getting better at, rather than keeping a lid on it. And you know, when those feelings come, and they will come, and they'll come thick and fast initially, and then they'll get less and less frequent over the years. But you know, when they do come, just accept that and think, yeah, okay, you know, I thought about that person, that's triggered something, and I'm just going to sit with that for a while. And I'm, you know, I might have a little cry, might have a little write down how I'm feeling, and then it will pass. And it's much better to do that than kind of just try and think, oh God, you know, I don't want to be thinking about that right now. Just go with it.
Yes, another magic word there for me, acceptance, which is I think really, really key. It's, you know, I think acceptance is one of those things that gets quite confused. Actually, people see acceptance as having to accept the loss, which actually it's never been, for most people, it's never going to be okay, you know, the loss. It's not about that. It's just about accepting the grief and the journey that you're kind of going to go on, and having some acceptance with that, I think really helps it, ironically, to become more peaceful. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah, definitely, because when we don't express stuff, it stays in us and it makes us ill. And you know, it's suppressed in our bodies, and it stays with us, it stays in our bodies, it stays in our minds, and you know, that's just not healthy. So just get it out.
Don't hold your issues in your tissues.
Yeah, 100%. I love that.
Oh gosh, don't know where that came from. Anyway, but no, I think those are 3 fantastic and really healthy tips, Suzanne, ways of kind of dealing with the grief. So thank you for sharing those. They're really helpful, and I'm sure they will help somebody out there. And also, if people are feeling a little bit stressed out and a bit anxious right now and not very calm, where can they kind of get hold of you?
So my website is called calmpreneur.com, and as the name might suggest, it's kind of aimed at people in business. It can be anyone in business. I didn't want to make it just for women, although mainly it is women that visit my site and that are in my group, but it's inclusive. And it basically, the website, it's got lots of resources on there. There's some support pages as well for if you're really struggling. And you'll also find a link to my, what I call the Calmpreneur Hive, because you'll notice a little bee shows up now and again on my website. So I've got a little hive, which is like just a free resource area with checklists and things in it, and courses, so people can go there as well if they need a bit more extra help.
Yes, and you have got a lovely little Facebook group as well, haven't you, which I'm part of?
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really nice. It's I've run so many groups over the years, like on Facebook. I love Facebook. But yeah, this group just feels so natural and real, and it really engaged. I love it. It's if anyone would like to join it, it's just called Calmpreneur Anxiety Survival Tips for Entrepreneurs and Business Owners.
Fabulous. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining me today and just, you know, being very open and honest and sharing your experience of loss. I really appreciate that, but also those fabulous tips, which I know people are going to find helpful.
Oh, thank you, Louise. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you today.